Hi, I'm Steve. That's my homage to Bernie Yes, or Steve anything. My Twitter handle's Austrian Anarchy, and those are two of my blogs. The first one is the overall book project that this came out of, and actually wrote about that for the Foundation for Economic Education, their publication called The Freeman, and they can be found at fee.org. And the guy who is at the center of this story and the big giant pain it was to research this story, I'm going to leave his last name out of it because it turned out, when I first started writing about this, I really didn't like what he did and didn't like him very much until I found out about him. It turns out that he is really a phenomenally very good person who kind of did something wrong, and it was a doozy. You guys, everybody familiar with Penn and Teller, the magicians? Yeah. Penn Jillette, and the Amazing Randy. You guys familiar with him? He's a friend of Penn Jillette. Okay, they did a show on Penn Sunday School. If you've not listened to that podcast, you probably want to because it's really entertaining, fun show. And they both have different, shall we say, styles of telling stories. Penn will tell you all day that every detail he gives you in a story is wrong. Might be wrong. If he says something happened in the 5 boroughs of New York, it probably happened in New Jersey. He said that when he was talking to Randy on his podcast. Now, Randy is a little bit the opposite of that. It just absolutely ticks him off when he writes something or says something and it's inaccurate. That's the same way I am. But now, zillions of people tune in to watch Penn Jillette, and I would call his an editorial style, and Randy's would be more of a historian type style, and Randy is closer to what I come from, but I enjoy watching both. Penn Sunday School, there's another guy that's essentially 2 jugglers and a funny guy, except they're all funny. And guy's name is Matt. I forgot his last name. Anyway, he's from New Jersey, and he has another podcast called The Ice Cream Social. I'm a big fan of that too. So if you have an opportunity to tweet this to those guys, that's their tweet, and say hi to them and listen to their podcast too. So also there's another guy on there. His name's Paul Mattingly. Anybody from Marion County, Kentucky? Anybody from Kentucky? Heard of the Ham Festival in Kentucky? A Ham Festival in Kentucky. They have a pig that they praise called Pegasus. If anybody remembers the Youth International Party, 1968, they nominated Pegasus for president. And it appears that those two are not related at all, which kind of goes into a little bit about researching anything. You run into a whole lot of stuff that appears to be the same thing, comes by the same name, and has absolutely no relation with each other at all. So, this top one is a mile away from the Knoxville FBI building. This mansion, the government right here, is the Knoxville, Tennessee FBI building. One of the guys that I'm going to talk about used to work at the previous building that was downtown Knoxville, much more modest building. This is the book I've been working on. I don't know, can you guys in the back see the face on there? I can't read it all. Oh, it's hard to read, but it's because it's pretty tight cover. But I studied Chip Kidd on learning how to make book covers. I made that myself. down here's the blurb. When I started doing FOIA requests on this after I ran out of news articles to look at. And I was wanting to, because there was a lot of information in the news articles that looked like it was a little bit of speculation. And the thing about 1972, that's when this happened, 1972 news articles, the speculation in those was a whole lot less than what you see now. Now, it seems like almost every news article, not every one, of course, is more of an opinion piece rather than a straightforward who, what, where, when, how, all that jazz. But anyway, part of my research, I talked to the prosecutor who prosecuted the subject of this. Let's call the subject of this Ron. It's his real first name, and it's common enough. Talked to his prosecutor, Mark Zanites, and if you look him up, find out some interesting stuff on what he dealt with in the 1980s. He said, Mr. Esposito, if you keep writing like this, people will think you are some sort of fringe radical. Because in the Foundation for Economic Education article I wrote, turned out that this guy, while he was still a fugitive, was showing up in congressional testimony for funding for the FBI. And they kept bragging about how they indicted him in a week, or within a couple of days after identifying him and all this jazz. Never saw one congressperson in the whole thing ask, well, where is this guy and how come he's not in jail? And that was what Mr. Zanites was objecting to in the tone of my article. So anyway, this is how, now this story started, I was 10 years old when the story broke. And since my computer didn't want to play nice earlier during rehearsal, I'm going to I'm going to play for you that from right? And try it that way. Now,
a group of political terrorists with a strong sense of what makes headlines issued warnings in 3 major cities today. The time bombs that were planted in a number of the most secure American institutions, the banks. The terrorists, in anonymous letters to news media, said they wanted to show how effective they could be in a campaign to free all political prisoners in the United States. Police, working from information contained in the letters, later found and disarmed bombs that had been placed in vaults in 8 banks in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. Authorities in San Francisco disclosed that a bomb planted in another bank had exploded there last September but caused no injuries. The letter referred to long-range timers in the bombs, which supposedly were put in place 7 months ago. The terrorists said such devices could be useful in the future in plots to take over, quote, a luxury hotel, a corporate office building, or a superhighway. And they indicated that at some point they might use an announcement of an undisclosed bomb as a lever to win the release of political prisoners.
This was the ABC News.
Remember George Jackson and Sam Melville. Jackson, one of the Soledad brothers, was killed in an escape attempt at San Quentin last August. Melville was among prisoners killed in the Attica, New York riots.
Good evening. San Francisco and Chicago and in New York today, police were alerted that there were bombs planted many months ago.
This is Baltimore Guys, yes.
Letters sent to newspapers and broadcasters warned it was the start of a new campaign to secure the release of, quote, political prisoners. Police were mobilized. The letters supplied the names of the banks, the numbers of the safe deposit boxes, and in some cases even the keys. With that, the bomb squad moved in.
An unidentified group of activists determined, they said, to free political prisoners. Today gave the police in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco a frightening demonstration of their intentions. Newspapers and radio stations in Chicago and San Francisco received long, handwritten, unsigned letters. The letter said that time bombs had been placed last July in safe deposit boxes in 9 banks in 3 cities and could go off at any time. The banks were named, and numbers of the boxes given, and a safe deposit box key attached to each letter. The bombs had been planted. They were real, but they didn't go off. Bomb squads waited at the 9 banks with time locks to open the vaults. Carefully and nervously, they opened or drilled open each box, took out a bomb, and defused it. Only one bank, the Bank of America branch in San Francisco, contained no bomb. It apparently exploded last September, doing only minor damage. Here's how the delicate job was accomplished from coast to coast.
Okay, that was the beginning. This story opened the news on all 3 of the major networks, same day, which back then, these days, that might not be that big of a deal, but back then, it had to be a really big story for all 3 of the networks at the same time, at the top of the news to announce this. Now, these are the notes, the handwritten notes that these are the handwritten notes that they talked about. The top one is the Chicago Daily News. It was sent to Mike Royko, who was at that time either the biggest or second biggest syndicated columnist in the United States. And the bottom is the ABC, the same thing that appeared on ABC. And I wanted to get a look at those, and so that was part of what my FOIA request to the FBI was about this. Now, here's a couple of things about doing a FOIA request on something like this. They're going to be hesitant to give you anything if the subject of the event is alive. And it appears that they will use anybody connected with the event to say there's somebody still alive and just not give you anything. I asked for these notes. I asked for the list of the components. I asked for, they identified the guy in about a week. I asked for his copies of his wanted posters, and I asked for copies of any statements that the FBI had given because to the press, because there was numerous news articles referenced a news conference that the Director of Justice and the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had given to the press. They denied every bit of that under the reason that this guy is still alive. Well, he was still alive when they put the FBI posters out. He was still alive when they were talking about him. He was still alive when, I'll tell you a little bit later how I ended up getting the press release. He was alive when they released to the press his Social Security number, which the San Francisco Chronicle published. And it was on his wanted posters, along with all of his aliases and all these Social Security numbers he was using under his aliases. And this is my forgery of the notes, because I'll tell you in a minute where I found a copy of his notes. He hand wrote these notes, sent them to news people all across the country. Royko, also Walter Cronkite. Let's see, there were 14, I think, listed in his indictment, and each one was a count each one was a criminal count of intimidation of some kind. Let's see. Let me see if this will play nicer, because you guys are interested in the hack, right? Come on.
A hole was drilled in the face of the clock, so the clock was to serve as a switch. Batteries were in the charger, which served as a source of power, and the battery recharger was further loaded with approximately a half a pound of what appears to be smokeless powder. This, in my opinion,
would make an effective bomb under the circumstances. How much damage could it have done? I would say it would probably blow out the face off the safe deposit box, and possibly could seriously injure or kill somebody who was right in that position.
By the way, those were the NBC and CBS broadcasts where they actually had, excuse me, they actually had Lieutenant Kenneth O'Neill of the New York Bomb Squad talking about the bombs. The police in Chicago and in San Francisco did not. They wouldn't show the press the bombs, which is fine. And too bad you couldn't see the video because we got a lot of good hackers of all ages here, and I could not tell by looking at the video what the brand of the charge, the battery charger was that he used for a case for the bombs and to hold the 4 D-cell batteries. And also he used a calendar clock. Now, if you were anybody familiar with a calendar clock, because they are really out of style now. It was an analog clock that had the day and the date on it, and you can still find them at some of the office stores, and except these things were just such a pain in the butt because back then it was before quartz movement, so it was a battery-powered electric clock that's just notoriously inaccurate to start with, and every time you have a month that has something other than 31 days in it, you've got to change it at the beginning of the month, the next month. Today, what somebody like that would use is probably one of these. It has a calendar in it. It has a clock in it. It has an alarm. It turns itself on. It was $14 at the AT&T store with no contract. Also, anybody who knows just a little bit about electricity can add enough battery to this thing to let it last years. His ran about 7 months. You've got a 7-day register, Monday through Sunday, Sunday through Saturday, and you've got 31 days, 7 times 31, 271, 7 months. The effect he was wanting, or that he was threatening, was to put bombs perhaps in wet concrete building under construction to get an effect like this. Now, this is from the very cool website implosionworld.com that shows how they implode buildings and such. And essentially what you want to do is get your munition into the middle of a concrete column. When you blow it, the concrete shatters. You're left with the rebar, and the rebar is not by itself, is not strong enough to hold up the building above it. He was going to use these bombs, or threaten to use these bombs, to hold buildings hostage, and he was telling the rest of the radical left that they should quit threatening to kidnap people or assassinate people or blow up buildings that had people in them, and do something like this to hold the building hostage and then get what they wanted, free political prisoners or whatever, and then reveal where the bomb actually was located. Because if you put that in on, say, the second floor of a building and then build some more building above it for 5 months, then if the thing goes off, you pretty much ruin the whole building. You don't have to knock the whole thing down. But anyway, that was the concept that was in the notes. Let's see, I want more specifics, the components and such. And I know the FBI. Oh, by the way, if you caught it on the news articles, the first bomb went off in September of 1971, and he had placed the bombs in July of 1971, 3 major cities, 3 banks each. That was when the investigation began. The investigation was combined FBI and Internal Revenue Service. Anybody want to take a guess at why the Internal Revenue Service is involved? Firearms Act of 1935. The IRS was the ones who enforced taxation of explosive devices, and nobody had paid taxes on these bombs. So that's how they were involved. The FBI was involved, and it's not exactly a stretch, but now my background, I've got a finance degree from the University of Tennessee. I studied banking and worked in it. And it kind of surprised me when I was researching this. Safe deposit box is the only thing in a bank the federal government says they have nothing to do with. Your FDIC insurance does not cover anything in your safe deposit box. If your neighbor's box blows up your stuff, not covered by FDIC at all. It's only your deposits that are covered. But there's a little bit of banking law that if it's an FDIC insured institution, if you make a material lie to an employee of an FDIC institution, then that's a felony. Well, this guy ran all the boxes under an alias. Last name Moore, M-O-H-R. And I guess the spy guys called what he did a live double, because the actual identity, the actual person whose identity he was using, the common term now is identity theft, was alive, living in California, and a few years younger than him. Something else that he tended to do on his false identifications was pick people who were 6 to 8 years younger than him, which was probably a good idea because he looked younger than he actually was. Anyway, so he had 13 counts at least in each city where he set his bombs. And so other places I had to look since I wasn't getting anywhere with FOIA requests was newspaper articles I mentioned. Ended up going off on a wild goose chase and got to talk with Mark Rudd, who wrote this book, on the ground with the SDS and the Weathermen. Larry Sloman, also known as Ratso, he wrote Steal This Dream about Abbie Hoffman. By the way, if you're researching anything from the 1960s and 70s, it crosses Abbie Hoffman. Abbie Hoffman's going to be in there. You might as well. I'll show you where you can get a lot of Abbie Hoffman information that hardly anybody seems to realize. And also, this cool guy, Paul Krassner, he was one of the Youth International Party. He was the guy who coined the term yippie, and Abbie Hoffman's wife, Anita, codified it into the Youth International Party. But they, and like a lot of stuff, it was marketing. Abbie Hoffman was the first one who would tell you that they were doing a lot of theater. He called himself a Groucho Marxist. Actually, when I get to the vault, I don't show it on the slide, but his file is alphabetically right next to Adolf Hitler's. And I think if he were still alive and he saw that he would probably do an hour of shtick about it, like what's the difference between Abbie Hoffman's FBI file and Adolf Hitler's? Abbie's is bigger, which is true. Anyway, so I got a hold of the prosecutor who I quoted on the front of the book for now anyway, and he told me to look up this guy, Donald Sechleben. I am probably butchering the poor man's name, but anyway, might not think he's such a poor man when we see the next slide. I found him. He turned out he decided to be a big blabbermouth to the Associated Press about some kind of terrorist investigation. And also they found child pornography and that he was distributing child pornography, and he's in prison now. So I wrote to him, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons couldn't find where they put him the first time, so I got my mail got sent back to me. So then finally, when they gave him a permanent suite, I wrote back to him again, made sure I gave him paper and a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I still haven't heard back from him. It'd be interesting to find out what he knew. One of the things I was trying to find out was if that first bomb, actually there's an error I made in my article at the Freeman. I said, like everybody else who said anything about it, that bomb went off prematurely. Well, it didn't, and I'll show you how I found that out here a little later. Anyway, covered that earlier. It was turned down, and again, his Social Security number was in the San Francisco Chronicle. That's the image that's on the cover of the book that's not visible enough right now, the one on the left. This is his wanted poster from 1972. I found it on eBay. If you're researching anything to do with banks and people who are messing with banks from this period, they're putting all their old wanted posters on eBay. And this was I think I got this from a savings and loan in Maryland or something. Anyway, that's the version that went to the banks. That's also the version that was on the set of Barney Miller behind Wojciechowicz's desk. I think it was the last 2 episodes of season 1 and one of the early episodes of season 2. So the FBI gave them a copy. They wouldn't give me a copy. Oh, by the way, Barney Miller, love that show. And on my YouTube channel, I got plenty of Barney Miller on there. Also, there's 2 episodes that the owners of the copyright to Barney Miller apparently think it's just perfectly cool and fine that I have them in full on my, or as full as I could get them on my blog or on my YouTube channel, because there was a copy. I just acknowledged that it was somebody else's material, and I said, "Groovy, okay, go ahead." At least that's what they told the YouTube people. There's another one I posted. This is the version that would be that. Actually, I saw this in the post office when I was a kid in Matson, Illinois. Okay, this guy never got arrested until 1986 for anything. What's that at the top of it? Fingerprint, full fingerprint set. Full professional fingerprint set. Now, it took the FBI a week to identify him, even though he left fingerprints all over everything. And Mike Royko, in his article, after they identified him, Mike Royko wrote about him in his column. And he seemed to think that, well, leave your fingerprints just everywhere, you're going to get caught in short order. If short order to you is 14 years, then that's fine. Excuse me. Those are from one of his enlistments in the Army in the late 1950s. After he graduated from high school, he enlisted in the Army for did 2 years of active duty. Afterwards, he got a passport, traveled Europe, came back to the United States. Anybody want to venture a guess? I don't know if you got to look at the handwriting on the notes very well. Anybody want to venture a guess at the educational level of this guy? At the time he planted his bombs. Okay, he put the bombs in 1971. A few years before that, he had amassed a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in psychology, and a PhD in behavioral psychology from Stanford University. While he was at Stanford, now get into the good part. While he was at Stanford, he worked on the Freedom Summer Project, 1964. That's where he met Abby Hoffman. He worked did civil rights work in Mississippi. After, who was it? Now I'm forgetting, Stokely Carmichael, I think. After he took over SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he segregated that effort and told all the white guys to go back to their neighborhoods and work their neighborhoods, and told the black people involved that this is our community and we need to work this. Well, he continued to work in Mississippi. I think he got injured pretty badly there once, and his life was threatened the whole time he was working there. That was his general direction. He was a civil rights guy. That was his main line. And if you noticed what they said, he mentioned in his notes, he mentioned Samuel Jackson. Remember Sam Jackson? No, I'm sorry. Sam Melville, and the other guy was Jackson. Jackson was one of the Soledad brothers, civil rights guy. The other guy, Melville, his real last name's Grossman, he was a bomber who, depending on what time period you look at him, he was either in the Weathermen or he wasn't. In 1976, when the Weathermen started telling everybody that they never hurt anybody except their own people, any event that hurt anybody was all of a sudden out of their list of actions. Back then, the Weathermen had done bombings to avenge Melville, to avenge his death. He got killed in the Attica riot in New York. Anyway, now that guy had started off as a protesting. He was an architect for Bank of America. When Bank of America was going to open a bank in South Africa, he objected to working on that project, and he got pissed off and started bombing stuff like Bank of America buildings. Bank of America building, San Francisco, was where this guy's bomb went off, the only one that went off. Every article for a year about this guy linked him to the Weatherman. Well, he wasn't a Weatherman guy at all. And I would have been able to find that out a little bit faster if the FBI would have coughed up some documentation, but they didn't, so I had to find it out from other means, like talking to Mark Rudd and another guy named Matt Steen. Matt Steen was in the Weatherman too. He was the first little Weatherman to come out from underground. Did an interview with CBS with Dan Rather on 60 Minutes in October 1977. And guess which episode of 60 Minutes from October 1977 CBS can't find? That one. At least the last time I asked them. So hopefully if this gets around, that'll change. Anyway, that was a wild goose chase. This was the FBI Gazette. The Law Enforcement Gazette, I think. Law Enforcement Bulletin. There he is at the top. This is the one that caught him. Not his fingerprints. It was a police officer in, in Los Angeles who the police officer's wife was friends with this guy's wife, with Ron's wife, Dr. Ron. And he recognized him and called the FBI and said, hey, I think I know that guy when we saw this picture. Then the FBI went down to, by that time, the couple had moved to San Francisco. The wife had no idea his real name or his background or any of that stuff. And that's where he was arrested. Tried to get his arrest file from the San Francisco Police Department. Didn't get even a response from them. So, and that was also trying to do it on FOIA. Okay, now earlier, this video actually worked in here. Like I mentioned a few times. Okay, that guy right there, that's Paul Krasner. That guy right there, Abby Hoffman. The guy with the hat, with the hard hat, that's Dr. Ron. This is some footage from ABC after he was indicted, and they had footage of him at this is the 1968 Festival of Life that the Yippies did in Chicago, in the shadow of the Democratic National Convention. And he was, and this is at the Conspiracy 7 trial at the office, the defense office for them. He, like I said, he was one of Abby Hoffman's friends, and he was Abby Hoffman's guard during the 1968 convention. And I mentioned earlier that I'd been to a couple of the Hopes and SummerCon. I did physical security with mostly with Hope 4 and then a little bit with Hope 5. Whichever one was at. I was one of his security detail guys, and also I was all of Kevin Mitnick's security. That was one guy, just me. But anyway, he's a cool guy. And but Woz got stuck in an elevator with Woz. I'm surprised that the elevator hacker guys who go to different conventions don't mention Woz getting stuck in an elevator on his way to the keynote speech at Hope 5. But anyway, it was me, Cheshire Catalyst, and Kush, and a couple other people. Anyway, we got out of the elevator. He got to do his thing on time. So anyway, mentioned the vault. This is where there's just loads of information that if you're getting denied FOIA requests, it might actually be in here. And I found plenty of stuff in here. Excuse me. If you're looking for information on somebody, find, kind of, not, I don't know a cool way to say this, but find somebody who is dead and famous that they knew and look at their file, and the person you're looking for might be in there. If you notice, this says Abby Hoffman, part 1 of 50. And this is the first web page you get. There's a page 2. There is loads of information in here. There's a search box here. When you search it, that's fine. It'll narrow it down to any of those files that your search term is located in. And then once you get down there, when you open one of the files, you got to start your search all over again to find the page where it is. And that tripped me up a little bit. But Dr. Ron's last name is in 3 of those files. His last name happens to be the same last name as a judge or somebody else who was associated with Abby Hoffman, so that file doesn't count. His name and his FBI file number are on the manifest for an airplane flight from New York to Chicago for the trial. Getting close on time now. Anyway, I found that in there. Also found something else in there too. The parties Abby Hoffman used to have in New York, sometimes they would kick them off with a flash device, and it was essentially a metal can with some gunpowder poured in it, and somebody touch it off and make a flash. When I got the court records for Dr. Ron, it sounds like that's what he thought his devices would do, even though he stuck them in safe deposit boxes. They each had between 8 ounces and 16 ounces of Hercules red dot gunpowder, and I'm convinced that he just thought that would make a flash and a bunch of bunch of smell and all that, and not create the explosion that he actually created. Also, he set the one that went off to happen on Labor Day weekend, in the middle of the weekend, when there shouldn't be anybody involved. Problem with that from us kind of technology leading folks. If you've got clocks that are that crappy, it might not be going off exactly the time that you think they're going to go off. Something else about those bombs, though. Those were finely crafted bombs, and now anybody who looked at those bombs would know immediately that the weathermen didn't do it, because the weathermen's bombs were crap. That's really, you can fake bad, but you can't fake good. You can't fake. If you're not an artesian, you can't fake artesian. Did I say that big word right? So anyway, and it's blurred from the FBI site. Thought it was amusing. It says, included here are many new FBI files that have been released to the public but never added to this website. This is on this website. They're telling you they got a bunch of files that were never on this website that are on this website. And anyway, after my head got done exploding trying to read this, I moved on. Let's see. This jazz I already talked about. Mike Royko. Mike Royko's file is in the vault too. His kids did not know that his file had been, that he even had an FBI file. I contacted his kids doing my research. And here's from the Domestic Intelligence Division report from the FBI. And I was looking for the note, and gee whiz, look what I found. The whole note that they said I couldn't have because Dr. Ron is still alive is sitting right there in Mike Royko's FBI file. And he's got a bunch of them. Cool. He's got a small file, but this was in there. Got court documents. Looked in the vault for the reporters, because this was after I found that. So when I got the court documents, I found the other reporters that received notes, and I started looking for them. Didn't find anything right off. I've got in here later, David Brinkley. He was a recipient. I did a FOIA on him for his file. I received his file the day after I was approved for this. It showed up in the mail. And it didn't have anything to do with this bomb plot. It had some pretty cool, interesting stuff. It started in 1944, ended in 1972 or 1973, but there was nothing in there about this bombing plot. J. Edgar Hoover, that's the thing about FOIA too. It's not enough that the person's dead. The FBI has to know they're dead before they're going to give you information on them. Well, J. Edgar Hoover is somebody with a lot of records. And if anybody knows he's dead, the FBI knows he's dead. And it's just, at the time, he just had some just stuff I wasn't interested in. I'm sure other people are interested in his funeral arrangements and the crap that was in his office and stuff, but I wasn't. So anyway, I eventually got, when I asked for a special way, asked for his public press releases and stuff from the month of January 1972. I got the press release, what they told the press. They didn't tell the press he was involved with the weatherman at all. That was, later I found another thing that he wrote. He died later on in 1972. And then later on I found an article he wrote that has Dr. Ron as a lone wolf. And if anybody knows if he had any connections to anybody else, it'd be J. Edgar Hoover when he's writing a paper for a law journal. Not that you can believe everything that J. Edgar Hoover ever said or believed, but he would have been in a different category if he was connected with another organization. Let's see, Walter Cronkite, heard him on there. He died tonight. I forgot what year he died, but his file went into the vault 2011 or so. And one of the things I was looking for was bomb components. And you notice, now this isn't, they didn't make a mistake and fail to redact his file. There's redactions all over the place. And I did try to look at it as just text, and they really redacted it. They didn't leave junk there. So this page was the page I've been looking for months. Each explosive device contained at above bank consisted of a Bradley cordless electric repeat alarm calendar clock made in Japan, model 202. 4 holes drilled through the crystal over day and date. Wired to a Mallory Duracell battery charger equipped with 4 size D Duracell batteries. Bottom of charger was removed and interior wiring had been rewired to batteries as power source. Also, approximately 8 ounces of Hercules Red Dot smokeless gunpowder was packed inside, as was 1 Sylvania Blue Dot S52 flash bow. Actually, Sylvania never made that model of flash bow. It was most probably an S25, and I found that out because there's actually a flashbulb expert on the internet, because there appears to be a substantial new old stock flashbulb collecting bunch of people around the world. So anyway, I wrote to him and we wrote back and forth and did our own speculation and figured it out. Check every page when you do your Google searches. This is from the Brazilian Special Police. The FBI wired them in 1972 to be on the lookout for this guy. It lists his passport numbers. It only lists 2 of them, the one in his real name and the one under his alias. Oh, by the way, while his bombs were ticking down in the banks, he was on a second enlistment under a false name in basic training in the Army. And when the first bomb went off, he was in basic training. And that jazz about the FBI being able to match latent fingerprints to known fingerprints in 3.5 minutes is a bunch of hooey. Well, maybe not a bunch of hooey, because they actually have to have the fingerprints from the Army. The Army didn't give anybody his fingerprints until they declared him AWOL in December of 1971, or January 1972, depending on which version you believe. But anyway, this came up on a Google search when I was searching for his aliases and his name together, and it was about 20 pages in. But anyway, in Brazil, it declassified a bunch of their documentation. This came from archive.org. William Gray Arbor, retired FBI agent, retired in 1973, was being paid a salary of $36,000. Somebody else's FOIA request, they put it up on archive.org, and this is the guy who identified Dr. Ron and received a $200 bonus for identifying him, which is later in the file. Testimony of Frances G. Knight. She was testifying before Congress. She was the passport boss. She was testifying mainly about Who's the LSD guy? Timothy Leary. She was testifying about Timothy Leary's escape. The Weathermen broke him out of jail and spirited him away to Algeria. And then he decided to go live in Afghanistan after he pissed off the Algerians. And then got, I think the Afghans gave him up to, this is all in the 1970s, early 1980s. Don't remember his timeline. But anyway, she was testifying about how his false documentation was done, and she mentioned Dr. Ron in it. Her, and also in the Weatherman thing on Wikipedia, it said somebody lost their job over this. Well, she didn't, because she kept working there until 1999. I don't know who did. I didn't edit and asked for some citation needed. Anyway, found that's also at archive.org. And now, quirky thing about archive.org is some things come up on Google and point you over there, and some things don't. They've got their own search that works pretty good. So if you're not finding it on the Google, then check out the archive.org. Anyway, here's the takeaway. If you find something, say something to archive.org, and also make your own copy, because there's a bunch of stuff that I found and then couldn't find again later, and I was kicking myself for not making a copy of it. Okay, that's all I've got for my presentation, and open the floor to questions if you like. Wow, I must have covered this well.
Yeah, I get it now.
Huh?
I get it now. What's your day job?
I work for, these days, I work for a local government and county level in East Tennessee. And I started working on this long before I ever got that job. And it's pretty much, it's almost as far as, its relevancy is almost as irrelevant as you get to this. I work with air pollution control.
You mentioned that this happened when you were 10 years old. What inspired you to go on this journey into this case?
I remembered this all of this time. And the thing, it was the hack of it. It was like, how do you make, back then, it was like, how do you make a time bomb, a 7-month-long timer? And then the other side of it was, how do you detect that if somebody did that? And, short of dogs going through the bank vault, I still really don't know, because electrical clocks, especially the ones now, don't make a lot of noise. You're going to put a microphone in every safe deposit box and all that, so that's not going to work. So you're pretty much not going to detect this if somebody puts it together. Now, I did talk to some concrete guys over the years, and sticking something like that in their concrete, that doesn't sound like that's happening. The concrete guys on a construction site are, unless you are the concrete guy, then you're probably not going to be able to get away with that. Anyway, it stuck with me all this time, and thing was, over the years, I would ask people about it. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't remember anything about it. And finally, a Google search about 2 years ago, I finally came across one article about it, and then I had his name. I remembered the wrong year. I thought it was 1971. It was 1972. And when the news broke, anyway. And that's when the whole thing opened up. And then the hard part about that was evaluating the information that was out there, of which is correct and which is not. That was it. And finding other sources of information to fill the holes.
Thanks a lot.